The following is a Cable 14 special presentation.
We want to acknowledge that the City of Hamilton is situated upon traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America. And we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cable 14 2025 federal election debates presented in partnership with our good friends at the Hamilton Spectator. Hello everyone, I'm Mike Fortune, and for the next hour I will be your moderator as we feature candidates from the riding of Hamilton Centre. Joining us live tonight in studio, we have representing the New Democratic Party, Mr. Matthew Green, and representing the Green Party, Mr. Sandy Crawley. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for being here tonight. Candidate Aslam Rana did confirm on April 2nd and again on April 21st that he will be attending tonight's Cable 14 debate. We received notification very late this morning that Rana will not be attending. This morning's email says that the candidate does recognize that Hamilton Centre is one of the tightest ridings in the country and that he will be focusing his time knocking on doors. We also had invited Hayden Lawrence of the Conservative Party. His campaign representative immediately told us that they would be focusing their efforts on getting out to voters at the doors as much as they can for more personal contact, and that they were respectfully declining our invitation. Also running in Hamilton Centre are Cody Chenier of the Rhinoceros Party, independent candidates Carla Green and Michael Lumens, and from the People's Party, David Speaker. These candidates were offered the opportunity to make a recorded statement here at Cable 14 that will be included as part of tonight's live broadcast. Okay, for all of you watching from home now, thank you for joining us on your TVs or watching online from wherever you might be. The format tonight includes 2 minutes for each candidate to make an opening statement. We will then be inviting members of our local media to pose questions to the candidates here with us tonight. We will then be putting forward questions that have been submitted by you, the viewers. But more on that in just a moment, folks. After our viewer questions, we will have a second round of questions from our media panel, and then we will move to our open floor debate, where each candidate will be able to bring up a topic of their choice. And finally, we will finish off with a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate with us here tonight. And for you viewers at home or wherever you may be watching us live, make sure you tweet us on X at Cable14 or email election@Cable14 with any questions you'd like us to ask our candidates here in studio. Very important, please. Remember to include your first name and what neighborhood that you do live in Hamilton Centre. That completes all the housekeeping, folks. Let's get started with the 2-minute opening statements. Representing the New Democratic Party, starting off first, is Mr. Matthew Green.
Thanks, Mike. I believe that if you want the job, you have to show up for the interview, which is why over the next hour, I intend to make the case to those viewers watching at home here in Hamilton Centre who may still be undecided about who to vote for on Monday. I understand your uncertainty given everything that's at stake, and I know that there's been a concerted effort to push a strategic vote to keep Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre out of power. But the good news here in Hamilton Centre is that no matter who has been in government, between my predecessor David Christopherson and I, the NDP has always been a strong voice for working class people of Hamilton in the House of Commons. But just as importantly, our incredible staff of our constituency office has been an essential service to help work tirelessly to help seniors and people with fixed incomes file their taxes, access their pensions, and receive their child tax benefits and EI. To be clear, as witnessed here tonight, the Conservative candidate and the Liberal candidates are missing in action, and there is no threat of a Conservative win here in Hamilton Centre. Throughout this election, our team has been on the ground, knocking on doors, making calls, talking to tens of thousands of people across Hamilton Centre, and we've heard something very clear, that while Liberals and Conservatives push to turn our democracy into an Americanized two-party system, people here know better. They see the value in having a strong, experienced, and principled MP rooted in the conscience of the country of the NDP. This election is about who has your back when it matters most. I'm Matthew Green, and I'm proud to call Hamilton Centre my home. I've never forgotten who I work for, and I never will. And with your support on April 28th, I'll return to Parliament ready to keep fighting for affordable homes and food, good jobs, and a future where no one is left behind. Let's keep Hamilton Centre strong together. Thank you.
Mr. Green, thank you very much for that opening statement. We'll now be moving over to the Green Party. Mr. Sandy Crawley, with your 2-minute opening statement, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, full disclosure, unlike Hamilton, unlike Matthew, I only moved to Hamilton 8 years ago. Yeah, I'm there. 8 years ago, but I've fallen in love with it. I actually live in the same neighborhood. I live 1 block from my respected friend here. And when I first moved here, I served on his executive in the NDP. But then the Green Party called me to join their shadow cabinet, which I am still a member of. I'm a career artist, performing artist, and I have a series of leadership roles within the arts community, which I think is extremely important in this riding. And it's interesting. The reason I think the Green Party, well, there are many reasons I think the Green Party needs to be represented. One of them, in the person of Mike Morris up the road, I'm sure Matthew has worked with him in Kitchener there, who I think one of our skills is bringing parties together, working across party lines, and I think that's very important. The other thing is my perception, even though I was in at the birth of the NDP when I was a kid, sitting beside Tommy Douglas playing my Pete Seeger banjo and singing Labour songs, I've come to the Green Party because I think, unlike the NDP, I'm sorry to say, I think the NDP has become distracted by the brass ring and the grab for power. I think maybe with Mr. Layton, with Mr. Mulcair, this happened. There was a change. But I think the Green Party still has that role of bringing the most courageous, forward-looking policies, selling them to people, sensitive, sensible, and realistic policies, and then letting the old line parties, which I must include the NDP in, steal them. And so I'm really looking forward to having a good conversation with Matthew today. I agree with him. I don't think there's any threat of a Pierre Poilievre riding over here. And I am very disappointed. I got yesterday morning, I got an extremely offensive email from a poison pen letter, insulting me personally, and also my...
Crawley, thank you very much. Your 2 minutes
okay.
is up. We do need to continue to move
Rambling.
on now. You'll have more chance to talk during the debate, okay,
Thank
my
you
friend?
so much.
Thank you both for your opening statements. It's now time to bring in our local media representatives. We're going to be starting off with representatives. Let's talk to who they are first. From the Hamilton Spectator, Cheyenne Bola, Jason Guidola from CHCH News, and of course from CBC Hamilton, it's Sarah Piesker. There you see them all on your screen. Each media representative will choose a candidate to answer their question first. Once the question has been answered, we will then open up the topic to the other candidates to respond. We do ask you to keep your responses to no more than a minute, and I will jump in if need be. Our first question does come from the Hamilton Spectator, Cheyenne Bola. Cheyenne, your question, please, and let us know who you are directing it to.
Thank you. So my question is for Matthew. What can the government do to ensure more affordable housing is built along Hamilton's federally funded LRT line?
Well, I'm proud to say that as a member of council, I fought and successfully got what was called the community benefits program. That was the intention of the LRT program, was to provide deeply affordable housing. The city and the upper levels of government, including the federal government, have the opportunity to leverage lands that are here, but most importantly, make it a requirement that the development that does happen has deep affordability in it. And I'm not talking about affordability as a market average. I'm talking about affordability based on people's actual ability to pay. And as New Democrats, we believe that we can return back to a place where the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation goes back to the development of housing rather than seeing it downloaded not just to provinces but to municipalities. The federal government has the pockets, it has the budget, and it has the ability through its funding mechanisms to leverage the development that happens along the line, with the requirement that it is non-market, that it includes social housing, and that it includes cooperative housing, so that there's a mix of incomes and opportunities for families right across the line.
Mr. Green, that is time. Thank you very much. We will now give an opportunity to Mr. Crawley to respond to that exact same question, sir.
Well, it's interesting. I think the LRT line, obviously, we need to build housing there. I'm actually more concerned with the number of people who are unhoused in this riding and in this city. I actually work every week with a wonderful person named Ann Thompson out of the Faith Church, who feeds 450 to 600 hot meals, even in winter, over in Gore Park. We're being pushed behind City Hall because I guess people don't like the look of it. But we've got to look after those people. I was a bit disappointed in the way that tent cities, I was delivering food and clothing and bedding to some friends of mine in the riding near where we live. And all of a sudden one day they were gone. They said, oh, they're getting mini houses. Well, the mini houses are not sufficient. There's reportedly 1,500 people living in this riding, in this city, without housing. And I bet it's more than that. And we've got to look after those people. So that's more of my concern.
Thank you for that response. Do appreciate it. We now are in the open debate portion of it, so please feel free to talk amongst yourselves regarding that particular topic from the Hamilton Spectator's report.
Yeah, I think Mr. Crawley raises a very important question. You know, I've been serving as a civil servant here in Hamilton Centre for close to a decade, my first 4 years as a city councillor. And what we've witnessed is housing permits and record numbers of cranes dotting the skies with condos being built while simultaneously people are left out in the streets. This is the problem when people make the argument that housing is simply about supply. Housing is not simply about supply, it's about affordability. And no matter how many condos are built in downtown Hamilton, as long as they're out of the reach of everyday Hamiltonians, we're going to continue to have the record numbers of houselessness and homelessness that Mr. Crawley's been talking about. So when you see people living in tents, that is the symptom of a system that has simply left people out of any options. They have no choice and they're forced into these precarious situations.
I'm always amazed at the variety of people across demographics, people who obviously have middle-class backgrounds, young, old, who are without housing. The Green Party believes that housing is a human right. It's a basic, and we have to build climate-resilient housing. We have the materials, we have the skills. We had a very interesting talk at the Perkins Centre the other night with Homes in Hamilton, and there was someone who brought up the idea that had come decades ago that we can make green steel here, as well as all the lumber, of course, which Mr. Trump doesn't seem to think he needs. So I mean, we can make a lot of progress with good leadership. We don't want. I was going to change the subject, but I'll wait.
Well, if I could, just to add to that, I think elections matter, and part of the disappointment of not having a Liberal candidate here is there's nobody to hold account for what the Liberal government has announced. And clearly, we have a situation with the leader, Mark Carney, under Brookfield Capital Asset Management, who actually privateered from the corporatization and the commercialization of housing. We've seen nothing in the Liberal platform that deals with rent evictions, that deals with rent control, that deals with actual purpose-built non-market housing. So when they talk about housing, what they're really talking about is providing subsidies to developers to continue to use our housing market as a casino or a piggy bank for multinational investors. And, you know, I think that this requires more scrutiny for the people who are at home. This goes beyond headlines, it goes beyond slogans, and it requires a deep, deep, deep interest in what it is they're actually planning to do as a Liberal government.
Thank you very much for that discussion, gentlemen. We do appreciate it. More thoughts on that can be talked about during the open forum later on. We do have to continue on with our media panel. She's back from CBC. Sarah Piesker, your question, please, Sarah, and who you'll be directing it to.
Sure, thank you. This question is for the Green Party candidate. Provincially, the Greens ran a full slate in Hamilton in the recent provincial election. This election, the party has only 2 out of 5 ridings in which candidates are actively campaigning. Does the party or its values not resonate the same federally? And why is the difference?
I don't think there's any problem with Greens when I ran provincially here in 2022 for the Green Party, for the GPO, I got 8.8% of the electorate, of the votes. And but you know, it's interesting. Only our party, our leaders, Elizabeth and Jonathan, made an offer to the other parties to work an electoral accord to make sure that we didn't have a Trump-light Pierre Poilievre government. And maybe it could be that the riding associations not in Hamilton Centre, but in the other, have said, okay, we don't want to take that chance. If there's a chance of a Tory coming through, what used to be called a Tory, I don't know if there's such a thing anymore. But you know, I decided it was good. I'd like to have a real discussion, and we're having a real discussion now. And I think that the NDP needs to be challenged. And I especially think that the Liberal Party needs to be challenged in the House of Commons. And so my fervent wish is that we don't get another Liberal majority government, because they get arrogant and they stop listening to other people.
Thank you, Mr. Crawley. We will now move on. Mr. Green, your opportunity to respond.
I think he raises an important point, and I would say in defense of not just the Green Party, but other parties that are here. You'll know that New Democrats, along with the Greens, fought for proportional representation. It was the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau who decided not to put that through. So what they've done effectively is allowed the fear of a first-past-the-post system, which is designed for 2 parties, to effectively result in what we've seen in the States. So their logic is that by reducing our democracy to 2 parties, we would somehow avoid the negative outcomes of the American 2-party system. I believe that we need to have more democracy within our elections, not less. And I believe that there's a great place for cooperation. We proved that we can do that. We cooperated with the Liberal government in order to deliver programs that we wanted to put forward: dental care, pharmacare, protection for workers, anti-scab legislation, and we opposed them where we thought that it didn't improve people's quality of life. We've been propositional, we've been oppositional. I believe that the place for cooperation in our Westminster parliamentary system is actually once the election has happened in the House of Commons. So people watching at home, you do not have to be afraid or be scared into a 2-party system when you have fantastic choices right here in Hamilton Centre with the NDP.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We will open this now for full discussion amongst the 2 of you.
Well, I'd like to speak very much in support of what Matthew just said. In fact, my question for the other candidates that I was going to ask was, what is your party's position on electoral reform? And I agree. I think that the worst betrayal was that promise that Justin Trudeau made, that this will be the first past the post election, and he backed off. Now, I must admit, I grew up in Ottawa. I used to go to the House of Commons watching the political game, and I had my doubts as to whether the Liberal Party was going to actually go along with their leader. But it's extremely important. So I hope that the NDP will push that. I know the Greens. I mean, it's a standing, it's a standing order of our party that we need to move to that. Every vote needs to count. People. You know, we keep electing governments with less than half of the people who vote for them.
People are politically estranged. They feel like their votes don't matter. They feel like they have to always hold their nose and vote for the less of 2 evils. New Democrats believe you don't have to vote for evil, that there's an opportunity within our electoral reform platform where we can have each and every vote count. We believe that having local representation does matter, but we also believe that the proportion of people who support a particular political ideology should also be represented in the House of Commons. And there was something very dangerous that happened in the last session of Parliament. The Conservatives tried to make the argument that cooperation was somehow undemocratic, that while they were at 40% and 60% of the rest of the House of Commons, representing the vast majority of Canadians, cooperating was somehow a bad thing. That is not just anti-democratic. That is frightening, particularly given what we're seeing coming out of the United States of America. So the best way that we can stop the rise of authoritarianism and stop the rise of a far-right populism is to actually encourage debate and discussion by having multiple parties and multiple ideologies represented in the House of Commons in a full way so that the debates and the democracy can happen there.
I will give you a final word if you wish, Mr. Crawley.
Well, I really want to speak to the Green voters out there is not to fall into that trap. That 8.8%, I don't expect to get it this time. I don't expect to be a representative. I think it's probably going to be this gentleman right here. But we need some parity. We need to get 2% across the country so that we get some of those tax dollars that go to organized parties. And so please don't be scared off. Vote Green.
Thanks to both of you for that. And of course, thanks to our local media. We'll be seeing more of them a little bit later on. That concludes our first round of questions from the Hamilton Media panel, as mentioned. Now we're going to be moving on from questions that we've been collecting from you, the people watching and that are interested on X at Cable14 and by email to election@cable14.com. Let's now give our candidates a chance to respond to some of your questions. The first question comes from Kelly, who lives in the North End neighborhood. Kelly refers to the Spectator's acclaimed Code Red series, saying, it seems there's been little improvement, and asking, what have you done to improve health outcomes and disparities related to social detriments like poverty, job security, housing, and food insecurity? Kelly would also be asking right now that Matthew Green answer the question first, followed by Mr. Crawley. Mr. Green.
I think that's such an important question because what Kelly outlined is that the social determinants of health, not just the cost of poverty, but its outcomes are having a tremendous impact on our communities. And I can say this proudly, that as a New Democrat, using our power with just 25 people in the fourth party, we were able to deliver dental care. That in this city right now, 9,000 Hamiltonians have access to dental care for the first time. And if you've lived here and you know people in this community like I do, neighbors and friends, you know that someone's smile is one of the first class indicators you have. And your dental care should not be tied to your place of employment. It should be universal. It should be accessible to everybody. But beyond that, we also delivered on pharmacare. And this was part of our confidence supply agreement. This was part of our ability to use our power and cooperate in the House of Commons to deliver at one of the largest expansions in our healthcare system since Tommy Douglas in the 60s. And with the pharmacare program, we've now for the first time provided supports for people with diabetes and supports for people seeking reproductive autonomy.
Mr. Green, thank you for that. Your response, Mr. Crawley.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. That is a great question, and it was a great answer. I would say, again, I haven't personally been able to fight for any of these forward-looking policies in the House of Commons. However, just up the road in Kitchener, Mike Morris got the first meaningful bill on disabilities, which is another issue, which is related, and he got all the parties to work together. And Matthew probably worked with him on that.
I did.
And unfortunately, I think it died on the order paper. But there's more work to be done. There's always more work to be done in terms of the determinants of health, addiction, again, back to homelessness. We've got to solve these problems. We can never give up on them.
Yeah. For every person that we see who is living in a tent, who is living precarious, dealing with whether it's mental health or drug use or just deep poverty, we know that that is a failure of social policy, that has been a refusal from the upper levels of government, both provincial and federal, to meaningfully engage in lifting people out of poverty. We've heard a lot of lip service, and quite frankly, as it relates to people living with disabilities, we know that there's a lot of homeless people who are disabled right now, but we know that ODSP is too low. We know that Ontario Works is too low. We know that this Liberal government, who promised to deliver a disability tax credit without delay, refused to. Instead, gave a paltry couple dollars a day when there are people right now who are on fixed incomes who absolutely cannot keep up with the astronomical raise in the cost of living, rent, food, etc. So these are decisions that are made in upper levels of government and require the political will to address them in a meaningful way to lift people out of poverty, reduce the social determinants of health, to ensure that everybody in our city has a chance to live with dignity and to live with proper health care.
Sandy, would you like to have a final word before we move on?
No, let's move on.
Let's move on. Sandy says we're moving on. We're moving on. Thanks to all of our viewers who have submitted questions to this point. We want to share as many as we can in time that we do have available here in our station. So keep sending those questions into us at X at Cable14 or by email to election@cable14.com, and we will do our best to get them into this debate. Okay, Hamilton, that wraps up round one of the Q&A period. Before we go to a second round of media questions, any candidate who was not invited to participate in our debate tonight, they had the opportunity to come in and record a statement in our Cable 14 studios. 3 of the 4 other candidates did so. We'll hear now from People's Party candidate David Speaker, Independent candidate Carla Green, and Rhinoceros Party candidate Cody Schneider.
Hello, Hamilton. I'm Cody. I'm a comedian, a dreamer, and proud Rhinoceros Party candidate for Hamilton Centre. I possess all the qualities you'd want in a candidate. I've always been transparent with my constituents. I'm proud to call this riding my home, and I don't vote PPC. Comedy's taught me how to listen. It's taught me how to see what others overlook, to speak up when something doesn't feel right, and to connect with people not through power, but through honesty. Let's honestly talk about something that affects over 6 million Canadians and few politicians seem to notice: accessibility. Now, when I say accessibility, I don't mean whether or not your ex can see your Instagram stories. I'm talking about real, physical, digital, and social access, something that every person deserves. It's personal to me. I've seen friends and family miss out on opportunities not because of ability, but because of architecture, attitudes, and apathy. So yeah, I'm running on jokes, but I'm also running on justice. And my platform is simple. Accessibility is no joke, but everything else is. My first priority, if you can't get in, it's not public. We need universal design standards, and we need funding to help retrofit old buildings. If your cafe's got Edison bulbs, but no ramp, I'm sorry to say, you're not hip, you're excluding people with outdated ways and overpriced brunch. If elected, we'll launch the No Barrier, No Brainer grant program, helping small businesses become accessible without going bankrupt. Second, better support for families. Let's be real, raising a family's tough enough without these extra challenges. We need better access to disability services. We need affordable, accessible housing options, and let's not forget financial support. And third, digital spaces need ramps too. We talk about accessibility like it's just physical. Government websites, healthcare booking systems, employment forms, they have to work with assistive tech. If your site doesn't work with a screen reader, it just doesn't work, period. We'll push for mandatory accessibility standards in digital design because no one should have to navigate a maze of unlabeled buttons just to renew your passport. I ask for your vote, Hamilton Centre. If accessibility rights are your main concern, regardless of who ultimately wins, your vote will highlight the impact of neglecting this crucial issue, showing them how many votes they've left at the door, demonstrating to politicians that accessibility is not just important, but essential for all Canadians. Because accessibility is about freedom, it's about dignity, and it's about making sure no one is stuck outside looking in. Unless you're Trump, of course. So if you're tired of the same old promises, vote for the party that charges headfirst into the issues. Vote Cody. Vote Rhino. Because we're not just running for office, we're tearing down the barriers on the way there. Love you, Hamilton.
Hello, my name is Carla Green, and I am your independent candidate running right here in Hamilton Centre. My background is social work, military, and law. I have an extensive experience in international trade and investment. I want to improve the infrastructure in Hamilton Centre. I feel it's very important to improve government and their efficiency and how they work. I want to improve all social services with a focus on homelessness and crime. In 2015, I've helped a homeless lady to be a millionaire. I'm looking to improving our healthcare and education with advancement on our current STEM program. We want to improve innovation and employment. I am now associated with the chairman of the African Diaspora Central Bank, and we're looking at bringing in an investment into Hamilton of $20 billion right here in Hamilton Centre. I want Hamilton to be a family-first friendly city. On April 28, please use your support and support me, Carla Green. Voting gives you the right to have your voice heard. I want to be your voice to transform and revitalize Hamilton Center. Thank you and have a great night.
I am Dr. David Speaker. I am a father, a husband, and a scientist working in virology. In this election, I am the candidate for the People's Party of Canada. I am running to serve and represent the people of Hamilton Center. My stutter has given me great challenges, but it has not held me back. I have spent my career fighting for truth, transparency, and accountability in science and government. Now, I am here to fight for the people of Hamilton. Together, we will prioritize our community. We will build a better life for our children and grandchildren. We will fight for common sense, family values, and medical freedom. Other parties are holding back our steel and aluminum industries. The price of oil and gas have increased and made travel unaffordable. Now, more than ever, small businesses are finding things tougher. A PPC government will unleash our natural resources to bring good-paying jobs back to our community. Let's address Canada's economy by balancing the budget and reducing tax. The PPC will unchain small businesses and Canadian industry and create a fair economy. Housing in Hamilton has become a great concern. The rise in immigration has created a housing crisis. This has pushed home ownership and rentals out of reach in Hamilton. Many pensioners cannot afford their rent. A PPC government will return to stable, sustainable immigration and lower housing costs. A PPC government believes in evidence-based medical science and transparency in health policies. Over the past 5 years, we have seen an erosion in trust in the healthcare system. Safe and effective narratives were pushed without scientific merit. The COVID-19 mRNA genetic vaccines and government mandates have left many vaccine injured. Some may never walk again. A PPC government will ban unsafe mRNA vaccines. We will ensure that no new drug products are approved without rigorous and proper testing. Other leaders want you to think our best days are behind us. I want to ensure our best days are ahead. This election, vote 24-hour community. Vote for common sense. Vote PPC.
Thank you all for recording those statements for our viewers at home. If you miss any part of this broadcast or want to see other Hamilton federal candidate debates here on Cable 14, well, you'll find all of the debates on demand at cable14.com. Free for public viewing and sharing, all courtesy of our friends at Kojiko and Rogers. All starting in about less than 5 hours. Okay, let's now move on to round 2 of tonight's media questions. Once again, from the Hamilton Spectator, Cheyenne Bola, your question, please, and who you'll be presenting it to.
Thank you. My question is for Sandy. What can be done to protect Hamilton Steel and other industrial workers from the impact of tariff war job losses?
Well, we've needed EI reform for a long time, and I think that we're going to have to be looking at that if Mr. Trump's threats come true. He seems to be on his way down a little bit there, but we're definitely going to have some difficulties there. And obviously, we have to create other kinds of employment. We have to give lots of support to people if they're put out of jobs by this rogue government to the south. And well, one of the things I mentioned a little earlier is we can perhaps redirect some of our production here towards the housing that we so desperately need across the country. This is Steel Town. We can supply the rest of the country that way. But, you know, if those people lose their jobs, Matthew's probably more on chapter and verse in terms of exactly what has to be done. For me, my EI issues are around precarious employment, around DoorDash and Uber and those role models that create basically
Crowley,
slave labor.
thank you for that response.
I changed the subject. Sorry.
We will now be moving
Thanks,
on to
Cheyenne.
Mr. Green.
No, I was in my office with the uniform members while Donald Trump was on the Rose Lawn with that billboard deciding their future fate. I'd been on the front lines and picket lines with USW steelworkers here. NAFTA essentially said that Canada couldn't, within its policies, have local procurement as a requirement for the infrastructure projects that we build here. We're now hearing Canadians for the first time really rallying around not just Buy Canada, but Build Canada and buy Canadians. And that's the important thing. Oftentimes when liberals and conservatives talk about the economy, they're only talking about productivity and GDP. They're never talking about wages. And in Hamilton, you'll know that we've seen this before. We've been there when we've seen companies bankrupted, whether it was National Specialty Bar. We've seen people on the front lines at U.S. Steel when their pensions were raided. So we need to have a program in place that has a condition that every corporation that receives subsidies during this economic attack on our country, that it is conditional on production staying here and that there is Canadian employment that stays. No longer can it be the case that big branch
Mr.
plants
Green, thank
take
you
the
for that
money
response.
and then lay people off anyways.
We will now open for full discussion.
Oh, the full discussion. Yes. I mean, on the topic of EI, Sandy raises a really important point. I've been working with the Interprovincial EI Reform Group. These are economists from across the country. I'm the NDP's very proud labor critic, but also the critic for jobs and workplace development. And he was quite right. 60% of Canadians can't access EI. So when the economy takes a hit, it's the working class people who feel it the most. Not only that, but the paltry 50% that they get is not enough to keep up with the rising costs of rent, of food, of their mortgages. It is forcing people into precarity. And for those Canadians that are out there old enough to remember, they'll remember that it was Paul Martin and the Liberal government who raided the EI to balance the budget. And now we've heard Mr. Mark Carney talk about balancing the budget. He talks about cutting $28 billion. So my question to people who are considering voting for the Liberal Party is exactly where is Mark Carney going to start his cuts? Is it going to be on health transfers to the provinces? Is it going to be on support for seniors? Is it going to be on health care, whether it's the dental care program or the child care program? These are the questions that Canadians need to ask, because when this government talks about balancing the budget and they're not willing to tax the ultra wealthy, ultimately what that looks like for you and the people at home are cuts to your essential services.
And we
Mr.
need
Crawley.
to make sure that we don't have a Liberal majority so that people like Matthew get to ask those questions, and people like Mike Morris and Elizabeth May and Jonathan Bednaud and David and Paul Manley out in BC. We've got to hold their feet to the flame, because we've seen what happens with those old line party majority governments. So yeah, precarity. You know, I mean, I've been a self-employed artist all my life, so I understand that. And this is the fact. I mean, so many professional artists who can't make enough of a living. We have to do other jobs. We pay into EI, and we can't get any money out of it. The gig economy is something that all the old line parties need to wrestle with.
Mr. Crawley.
So
yes.
But just on the gig economy, one of the projects that I'm working on is called sectoral bargaining. It used to be the time that unions could go and organize from factory to factory or from store to store. But when it's a gig economy, essentially when it's a digital platform that doesn't have a physical place for workers to gather, what that means is big corporations like Uber, Skip the Dishes, all of these things can exploit workers. Amazon is another example. Exploit workers without their ability to collectively bargain. As Canada's only Labour Party, we are going to protect precarious workers, and we're going to push back with sectoral bargaining to raise the floor for all people who are being exploited by this type of technology.
Unfortunately,
Thank you
of course,
very much
it's
for
a
that. We
provincial
do have to move on.
Jurisdiction. So
Coming in now from CBC Hamilton to ask the next question from the media to these two gentlemen, Sarah Piesker. Sarah, your question, who you're directing it to, please.
Yes, this question's for the NDP candidate. You mentioned the community benefits agreement earlier. What else has changed specifically right here in Hamilton Centre as the result of your work as MP?
Well, I can say this. One of the things that's overlooked is that when I go to Ottawa, that's my job. I'm a legislator. But my work is here in Hamilton Centre, and our office works to improve the material conditions for people. I said it in my opening remarks. When we file taxes for a senior or somebody on fixed income, when we get them back their OAS, their GIS, when we connect them to the child tax benefit, when we help reunify families that are having immigration problems, we're connecting them to this labyrinth, this process of government. And I'm proud to say that in our office, for those of you at home, you would probably know this, that when you come into our office, we're going to treat you with dignity and respect. We're going to help work with you to navigate these bureaucratic systems. And I'll tell you, when we get a situation where we can get somebody some back taxes, sometimes that's in the tens of thousands of dollars. We have materially improved people's quality of life across this city for the better part of 20 years.
Mr. Green, thank you for that. Mr. Crawley, would you like to respond to Ms. Piesker's question?
I'd like to hear the question again. I'm sorry, I was reading my notes here.
I was asking what has specifically changed here in Hamilton Centre as the result of Matt Green's work as MP.
Well, I'm afraid I don't have anything. I think that Matthew represented himself very well on that. So
we're happy to move on then to the next media question. By all means, we mentioned him off the top. He had a big news story he had to cover. He's finally in our Cable 14 studios. Ladies and gentlemen from CHCH, Mr. Jason Guidola. Jason, your question, please, and who you'll be directing it to.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening to the candidates as well. Thank you for having me here. My question is directed to the incumbent, the NDP candidate, Matthew Green. National polling is showing that the NDP is under threat for a potential loss of party status. If they're in the event of a leadership change, how much consideration would you tell voters in Hamilton that you would take upon with that role if it were become an opportunity?
Well, I would start off by rejecting the national narrative of 8% as being what's indicative here in Hamilton Centre. In fact, I don't believe it's what's indicative for incumbent NDP members who are fighting for their seats right now, because I know that New Democrats know their communities. We know the nooks and crannies. We know the issues because we actually live here. And as it relates to the hypotheticals about what happens next, what I'm most interested in our party is reconnecting with grassroots, ensuring that the future culture centers labor as the Canada's only Labour Party to help address the grievances of consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments that have left the working class out and left them behind. So I think that there's going to be a national discussion around workers. If we find ourselves with a Liberal majority, I think very quickly workers are going to find that their material conditions, their quality of life has in fact not improved. And that's going to be our position, to be the conscience of a country, to be able to go back to Parliament, work to make sure that working class interests of Hamilton Centre continue to be well represented.
That's time, Mr. Green, for your 1 minute. Sure. Mr. Crawley?
I don't... No, I don't have any response to that.
Mr. Green, we will let you continue then.
Yeah, I think that politicians get into trouble when they put their ambitions beyond their principles. And my principle is to serve this community. And so, we are, I think, building something incredibly beautiful. I am incredibly proud of the very strong campaign that we have run here in Hamilton Center. We have worked tirelessly. We have connected with thousands of people across the riding because we respect you. Even if you don't agree with us, we respect the dialogue. We respect the conversation on the doors. And I know that whatever happens on the 28th, I don't have a crystal ball. But what I do know is on the 29th, I'm ready to get back to Parliament to continue to work for you.
On second thought, if I might, I think that Mr. Green would be an interesting candidate for leadership of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you very much for those.
Of your question.
Thanks for those responses. We're going to go back to Mr. Gaidola. Mr. Gaidola, your question, who you'll be directing it to, please.
This is actually for both candidates. Last year, the UN put out a report that harshly criticized Canada's migrant worker program, and in the event of the topic of how it's being run in Canada, what type of reform or work would have to be done to ensure that this program is done to the point where we're not seeing UN reports harshly criticizing it?
And let's start with Mr. Crawley for that particular question.
Well, there's a bigger question here. Migrant workers obviously are important to our economy as they are to the United States. The way they're being treated there is really questionable. But there's a bigger problem that's looming, and it's the reason really for the existence of the global green movement and the Green Party, which is there are going to be regions in this world, equatorial regions, where it's going to become impossible for human beings to live. And in Canada, we have to make room for those people. We have a vast country here. We have to bring those people in. Obviously, one of the things we'll have to do is make sure that there is employment for those people, that we build for those people, that we know that immigrants always make our they are the key to growing our economy. But I think we have to deal with the bigger problem in the long run. But yes, I'm sure on migrant workers, there's always improvements that can be done. Obviously, we read the horror stories, and I think maybe we deserve some of the condemnation that we got from the UN. And God bless them. Let's keep those cards and letters coming in.
Crawley. Mr. Green?
As the party's labor critic, this is something that I dealt with very closely. I worked with Jenny Kwan, who is our immigration critic, and what the UN said is that this is a form of modern-day slavery. This should be to our shame, our collective shame as a country, that we're allowing big corporations to exploit people when they get here. New Democrats believe that if you're good enough to work here, you're good enough to stay, and you're good enough to get paid a prevailing wage. So what does that mean? We believe that we should have a tripartite approach. We should bring in unions, the government, and the private sector to do true labor market analysis so that when workers come here, they're tied to their trade and not to their employer. The thought that when you arrive and you hand your passport over to your employer and you're at their whim and at their disposal is a big part of the problem. We want to see that practice abolished. We want to see people to have mobility when they get here, and we want to see them have pathways to citizenship with the prevailing wage. If we provide a prevailing wage, then we will not allow big corporations to exploit migrant workers and undercut the wages of Canadian workers while doing the same.
To our candidates here in the Cable 14 studios, thank you very much for those lively discussions. We have a little bit more coming up. Before we get to that, though, big thanks to our media here in Hamilton. Cheyenne Bola from the Hamilton Spectator, Mr. Jason Gaidola from CHCH, and Sarah Piesker from CBC Hamilton for joining us here tonight, and of course to our media for joining us throughout the week. It's now time for our open forum, where each candidate will have a minute to raise a topic for debate, or they can ask a direct question. The other candidate will have 1 minute to respond without interruption. After that, you're both welcome to go back and forth on that particular topic. We'll be keeping a very close eye on time to ensure that each candidate will have an equal opportunity to ask and answer questions. Please remember, we are holding you to 1 minute for both asking and answering. Now, just before tonight's broadcast, Cable 14, we randomly drew numbers to determine the order for asking questions. First up, Mr. Crawley, your question, please.
Okay. I, as a lifelong self-employed artist working in film and television, writing and publishing, I've had a lot of leadership roles. I was president of a national union and so on. And I have a dream for this city, which is not new. I think 10 years ago, the wonderful CBC program Ideas did a kind of study of Pittsburgh and Hamilton, the steel town. Pittsburgh helped to save itself as a Rust Belt city by emphasizing culture, the arts. And I think we could do the same thing here. I've been working on a plan to do that. A lot of you will remember Mr. Tom Wilson, who was quoted in that very documentary saying, "Art is the new steel." And I'd love to know what Matthew thinks about that. I'll share some thoughts about it.
Yeah, I would argue that, I think it might be a stretch to say that art is the new steel. I think art has always been here alongside steel. We are a working class town that has experienced struggles, and you'll know that in arts and culture, struggle is a fertile ground for creativity. We would definitely want to see a future where the artists that came here to make it a city of choice retain the affordability. That's the thing that brought people here. It was the affordability. True. It was the ability to pay for their rent, to have studio space, to be able to collectively work with other artists. That's been lost. And so when you talk about things like renewal or gentrification, we have to be very careful that we don't become victims of our own success. So this is where programs like a guaranteed basic livable income come in.
Absolutely.
This is a program that my colleague Leah Gazan at a Winnipeg Center introduced. It would allow for people to explore their creative world while they're transitioning perhaps between employments, and doesn't necessarily put them under the pressure of having to work 4 or 5 jobs just to keep their head above water.
What I want to do, and I'm working on it, and I kind of put it off because of this campaign and because of the threats of the tariffs and all that stuff, but I really want to knock on the door of Madam Mayor Horvath, and maybe Matthew, you would support me in that, to bring the example of Calgary, Alberta. There's an amazing project out there called Arts Commons. They've got a 1,300-acre facility. They have brought all the professional and community arts together under one umbrella, supported by the private sector and public money, and there's an amazing rejuvenation going on there. And my friend who was running that program is quite willing to bring the city council together with the city council here, if I can find the champions. But I'm going to need some help getting those champions.
I mean, if I could, I would say this. I think that it's a fantastic idea. It's an important time, and one that will require all levels of government and community, right? Because art is happening in community. It's not necessarily happening in city hall or parliaments and so on and so forth. And so, Sandy, that's something that I would certainly be willing to work alongside you with. And I think it is an important question because there is an opportunity here, particularly around adaptive reuse of some industrial sector zones that might not be appropriate for reindustrialization. But I think
the cotton factory, it's happening. We can keep it happening.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for that conversation. We will now throw it to Mr. Green. Your question to your opponent standing here from the Green Party, Mr. Crawley, please.
Well, in a time of deep division and in a time when we see, further polarization in politics, Mr. Crawley in his opening remarks spoke about the idea of cooperation. He didn't say it specifically, but he said that within his party's platform that there are great, bold ideas that he wishes that the NDP would take to the House of Commons to be able to best represent the interests of Hamilton Centre. And so I want to put to Mr. Crawley, out of all of your best, big, bold, bright ideas in your platform, which idea would you want for me to take to the House of Commons to champion on your behalf?
Well, I'm going to dip into my own portfolio as the shadow cabinet critic for arts and culture and say the preservation of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Radio-Canada, is number one. It's not necessarily innovative at this point. I want people to go to greenparty.ca and look at our plan and read the comprehensive plans that we have. But the so-called Conservative Party, I call them the regressive Conservative Party, are threatening to do away with the CBC. We wouldn't have a symphony orchestra or a theater company or an opera company anywhere in this country if the CBC hadn't been broadcasting those people live. What we are proposing is more than doubling their allocation, which is still pocket change in Ottawa terms, so that we can maintain local news across this country. And also, we want to see the CBC put forward a platform, maybe a publish, whether we should call it a platform, but to replace the terrible thing that Facebook, our social media that we've become addicted to. Unfortunately, since they have refused to go along with the legislation put forward by Missy Guilbeault, who I have great respect for, if you're in the middle of wildfire country, you can't even go online to find out. What we think the CBC could put aggregate all of the fact-checked, real professional journalism into one place, not just their own work, but from the Spectator.
Thank you very much
Cable
for that
14.
response. Mr. Green, we'll give you the final
Thank
word
you.
before we have to move on to closing
I
statements.
think what Mr. Crawley outlines here is an important topic for us, because not only do we face, the threat of annexation and attacks on our economic interests, but there's also an important question about our cultural sovereignty. And I think that a lot of the misinformation and disinformation that he referenced in terms of needing fact checkers is permeating from digital platforms in the United States. They must be held accountable. And most importantly, we need to be reinvesting in our cultural sovereignty here. We need to make sure that our arts and our culture are well funded, not just in Canada, but for Quebecers as well, in the Atlantic regions from coast to coast to coast in the north. And I think that that's going to be an important opportunity for us.
Mr. Green, thank you very
times to
much.
come.
And
Thank you.
it's now time for us to move on to closing statements from tonight's candidates that are with us here in studio tonight. Now going in the opposite order from how we open tonight's debate, each candidate will have 1 minute, starting with the Green Party candidate, Mr. Sandy Crawley. You have 1 minute, sir.
I want to keep on with the topic we were just on. The other important thing that the CBC needs to do is maintain Indigenous language broadcasting and in as many Indigenous languages as are required. Just down the road in Brantford, we have an amazing community there that we have learned from. I guess my 1 minute pitch is, don't get herded off the cliff by the great man theory that only Mark Carney can save us. Make sure that we don't have a majority Liberal government, and vote Green so that we can keep the flame going.
Mr. Crawley, thank you very much for that. Final word for tonight's debate will be going to the new Democratic Party candidate, Mr. Matthew Green.
In this election, you've heard a lot of noise and it's caused a lot of uncertainty. But here in Hamilton Centre, the choice is clear. You can vote for an out-of-town, out-of-touch Liberal Party insider who didn't even have the common courtesy to show up to tonight's debate, or you can vote from somebody who actually lives here, who's always been on the front lines with you, not just at election time, but each and every day in Parliament and in our community. I'm not here to simply fill a seat in the House of Commons. I'm here to deliver results for workers and renters, for seniors and young people fighting for a future that they can actually live in. So if you want someone who will never be afraid to speak truth to power, to take on corporate greed, and to fight for real solutions, then I'm asking for your support to be re-elected as your local member of Parliament. Let's send a message that Hamilton Centre can't be bought, can't be silenced, and can't be ignored. I'm Matthew Green, and I'm asking for your vote on Monday, April the 28th, so we can keep building a future together to make sure that Hamilton Centre remains strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of our candidates for coming out tonight. I know the residents of Hamilton Centre appreciate you making the time to publicly present yourselves by joining tonight's Cable 14 debate. I know our local media does too. To finish off, a reminder of the full list of candidates you will see on your ballot in Hamilton Centre. From the Rhinoceros Party candidate, Cody Schneider. From the Green Party candidate, Sandy Crawley. Your independent candidate, Carla Green. Your new Democratic Party candidate, Mr. Matthew Green. Your Conservative Party candidate, Mr. Hayden Lawrence. Your independent candidate, Michael Lumens. Your Liberal Party candidate, Aslam Rana. And your People's Party candidate, David Speaker. Remember, Hamilton, if you've missed any of or parts of Cable 14's federal debates, you'll be able to find them on demand at cable14.com, free for public viewing, of course, sharing courtesy of our good friends at Kojiko and Rogers. It's going to be getting underway tonight at midnight. All the nominations, information you need, for voting, it's all available online. It's all at elections.ca. So please do your part. Get out, get educated, and vote in the federal election this Monday, April the 28th. Hamilton, thank you and good night.